Sacred Timeline Checkmate. Let's dive right into this explainer. I am going to completely deconstruct the greatest victory we ever thought we witnessed. Because what if the story we watched unfold in Endgame was never the real story at all? For years, we have celebrated this massive epic as the ultimate triumph. We watched Earth's mightiest heroes rise from their absolute lowest, most broken point, figure out how to travel through time, painstakingly reclaim the Infinity Stones, and finally defeat Thanos. I mean, it felt like the perfect, incredibly hard-fought ending to a saga that had been building for well over a decade. But I want to pull back the curtain today, because the more I analyze the underlying mechanics of the multiverse, the more one absolutely terrifying possibility emerges. What if literally none of those events happened naturally? What if this entire sprawling epic saga was actually a meticulously designed trap? For years, we've just taken the events of Endgame totally at face value. We cheered, we cried, we accepted it. But I want us to look really closely at the impossibly lucky moments, starting with something that has frankly always bothered me. When you actually step back, when you truly analyze the major turning points of this narrative, the details hidden throughout suddenly feel very, very different. Small moments that we just brushed off as lucky coincidences, or maybe just convenient movie writing to keep the plot moving, now look suspiciously calculated. And I want to start this entire breakdown by looking at the very spark that ignited the Avengers' second chance, the literal catalyst for saving half of all life in the universe. I'm talking, of course, about the rat. Let's just stop and really think about the absolute absurdity of Scott Lang escaping the quantum realm precisely because a rat stepped on a control panel at exactly the right moment to spark the time heist. After 5 years of absolute soul-crushing hopelessness, a rusted van sitting in a completely forgotten storage unit is visited by a random rodent. The survival of trillions of lives depends entirely on this rat, the true employee of the month, honestly, appearing at exactly the right physical place, at exactly the right microsecond, and its tiny paws activating exactly the right mechanical sequence to pull Ant-Man back into our world. The odds of this happening organically, they are mathematically indistinguishable from zero. It's practically impossible, yet it works perfectly. Scott returns, realizes only hours have passed for him, and instantly delivers the incredible concept of time travel to the Avengers. Without that rat, there is absolutely no endgame. Period. But see, our entire understanding of the universe changes the second we introduce the Time Variance Authority into the mix. We used to accept that rat as just convenient writing, just a funny little accident, right? But once we understand that an organization like the TVA actually exists to meticulously monitor, prune, and completely erase any unapproved branches of time, well, that rat feels completely different. It instantly stops feeling like dumb luck and starts feeling like a deliberate, highly calculated intervention. The TVA's entire purpose, their one job, is to maintain this sacred timeline. They literally do not leave things to chance. So if the fate of the entire universe hinged on that specific rat, you better believe that rat was supposed to be there. I really need to emphasize this terrifying revelation. The most critical time travel mission in history was completely authorized by the very forces that arrest other people for altering the timeline. Remember when Loki questioned why he was placed in chains and put on trial just for picking up a tesseract, while the Avengers literally traveled through decades, stealing Infinity Stones, interacting with their past selves, and causing absolute temporal chaos? The TVA's response to him was chillingly simple. They just said the Avengers were supposed to do that. Think deeply about what that actually implies. The time heist was not a desperate, unpredictable rebellion against fate. It was authorized, it was approved, it was fully expected. So the absolutely crucial point here is if the TVA expected the time heist, then the architect sitting at the end of time, he who remains, had already orchestrated the Avengers' every single move as if they were just pieces on a chessboard. This man sits at the literal end of time, holding the actual script of the universe in his hands. When you view it from that perspective, Endgame stops looking like a story about underdog heroes scraping together a miraculous way to save the universe. Instead, it starts looking like a highly classified, incredibly rigid mission that had already been written, reviewed, and stamped for approval centuries before our heroes ever even suited up. Suddenly, when you look at it this way, everything feels suspiciously perfect. Let's think about Tony Stark for a second. He initially completely refuses to help with the time heist. He has a daughter now, he's finally moved on, he desperately wants to protect his peace. Yet, almost casually, he sits in his kitchen one quiet evening, decides to run a quick Mobius strip simulation, and practically instantly solves the greatest scientific impossibility in the history of human existence: navigatable time travel. A problem that by all rights should take multiple generations of brilliant minds to solve is completely cracked by one guy in a single night. Now, is Tony just that much of an unparalleled genius, or was the inspiration subtly fed to him? Was the pathway to that massive discovery deliberately cleared of all obstacles so he couldn't possibly fail? And this brilliantly illustrates how even their absolute worst blunders were clearly part of the grand design. The Avengers truly believed they were improvising. They thought they were fighting against the odds, but in reality, I believe they were blindly following rigid instructions they couldn't even see. Let's look at the mission to 2012. Hulk is forced to take the stairs, he bursts through a door in a rage and smashes the briefcase right out of Tony's hands. Loki grabs the Tesseract and vanishes into thin air. To the Avengers in that moment, this is a catastrophic mission-ending failure. But step back and look at what it actually achieves. It forces Tony and Steve to travel even further back to the 1970s. And what happens there? Tony gets crucial healing closure with his father, and Steve gets a longing glimpse of Peggy Carter, setting up both of their ultimate emotional resolutions at the end of the film. Every single setback magically becomes a vital part of the ultimate solution. Failure wasn't an option because true failure simply wasn't permitted to exist. Which brings us to a massive turning point in my breakdown. We arrive at one of the most famous mysteries of the entire saga. Doctor Strange sitting on Titan, viewing over 14 million possible futures, and confidently claiming that only one single path led to victory. For years, we as an audience just accepted this incredibly massive number because it beautifully heightened the dramatic stakes. It made the Avengers' ultimate victory feel incredibly earned and miraculously rare. 1 in 14 million. But let's apply our new understanding of multiversal timeline manipulation to this iconic moment. Let's consider a highly disturbing possibility. Strange wasn't actually searching through naturally occurring futures. He was looking through a reality that had already been heavily filtered and severely pruned by a hidden master. If the TVA's entire job, 24/7 for eternity, is to constantly prune any timelines that branch away from the sacred timeline, then the multiverse that Doctor Strange was looking into wasn't a wild, untamed forest of infinite possibilities. Not at all. It was a perfectly manicured garden. He was looking at a heavily constrained dataset. I want you to imagine standing in a long hallway where someone has already locked every single door except one. Strange wasn't discovering destiny. He was merely finding the single outcome that the timeline's architect actually permitted to survive. From Doctor Strange's perspective, he genuinely, truly believes he has found the sole organic path to victory. But what he absolutely doesn't realize is that millions of other doors where maybe the Avengers win without a single casualty, or doors where Thanos is easily defeated in 5 minutes, have already been bolted shut or completely erased from existence by he who remains. Strange is just a rat navigating the maze, exactly how the maze maker intended him to. And this leads me directly to the devastating price of this supposed victory: the permanent removal of Tony Stark. The one man capable of building technology that could actually disrupt a carefully managed timeline. Think about who Tony Stark really is in this universe. He isn't just a guy in a suit. He isn't just an Avenger. He is a hyper-genius who continually, relentlessly rewrites the rules of reality itself. He built armored suits in a cave, he created advanced artificial intelligence, he mastered nanotechnology, and eventually he built a fully functional time machine. Tony Stark represents ultimate, dangerous unpredictability. If there was a single mortal mind in the entire vast universe capable of eventually discovering that the TVA exists and then inventing technology to actually rival He Who Remains, it was Tony Stark. From a hidden puppet master's perspective, this required outcome is just incredibly convenient. Thanos is eliminated to restore balance, and Tony Stark is simultaneously killed before he can ever become a true multiversal threat. Just look at the elegant, terrifying cruelty of this design. The one winning future that Doctor Strange sees absolutely requires Tony Stark to sacrifice himself. It's not his retirement, it's not his incapacitation, it is his absolute, permanent death. With a single snap of his fingers, the timeline's architect solves his two biggest headaches in one move. Thanos is wiped out, which corrects the universal population imbalance, and the one singular intellect capable of challenging the dominance of the sacred timeline is permanently removed from the board. Now look at the chilling aftermath immediately following the Battle of Earth. Tony's dead, Natasha's dead, Steve Rogers goes back in time, grows old and retires, and Thor completely leaves Earth behind. This effectively dismantles the universe's greatest protectors practically overnight. The Avengers, as a cohesive, unstoppable force that has guarded reality for years, simply cease to exist. The world is saved from Thanos, yes, but the massive shield that protects that world is completely shattered into pieces.
I see this aftermath not as some glorious, well-deserved retirement for our beloved heroes, but as a flawlessly executed transition plan that leaves the entire world completely vulnerable just as multiversal instability is engineered to begin. Seriously, think about the timing here. Just as the multiverse is about to heavily fracture, just as infinite new threats and Kang variants are preparing to bleed into our reality, Earth is left totally, completely exposed. The old guard is gone. If you are a multiversal conqueror looking to perfectly prepare a timeline for future manipulation, this is exactly the board state you would engineer. You forcefully remove the strongest defenders, but you do it in a way that makes the universe believe they actually won, so they completely let their guard down.
So, when we re-examine the incredibly famous portal scene, the flawless timing of every army and hero arriving at precisely the right second stops feeling like a miraculous organic rally. I want you to remember the absolute chills you got the very first time you heard Sam say, "on your left." It is undeniably incredible cinema. But let's strip away the soaring music for a second and just look at the raw logistics. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers, sorcerers, Wakandans, and cosmic heroes all stepping through magical portals at the absolute perfect microsecond to turn the tide of a war. To an audience, it looks like pure inspiration, but to a timeline architect, this is exactly what a carefully coordinated operation proceeding strictly to schedule looks like. Nothing arrives too early to ruin the dramatic tension, and absolutely nothing arrives too late to let Thanos win. Every single moving part aligns flawlessly. The Wakandan infantry is exactly where they need to be on the battlefield. Captain Marvel pierces the atmosphere at the exact necessary critical second to completely destroy the warship. It is almost too perfect, isn't it? Because it's not chaos miraculously turning into victory, it's a script being executed with terrifying military precision by an invisible director. And the crazy thing is, we don't even have to guess if this is true, because He Who Remains practically admitted it to us. He stated that he isolated the timeline and meticulously filtered the choices of billions of living beings, meaning free will only truly existed within the strict boundaries he allowed. He literally sat in his citadel at the end of time and proudly declared that he paved the road. He orchestrated the entire flow of time to prevent multiversal war, portraying himself as this necessary evil, a grand guardian of reality. But the terrifying underbelly of that grand claim is that no one, literally no one in the entire MCU actually had free will. I really want you to understand the weight of this. Every heroic sacrifice, every tearful emotional reunion, and every apparent hard-fought victory was just part of a script written centuries before the characters ever even lived it. Black Widow falling to her death on Vormir, Captain America finally proving his worth and lifting Mjolnir, Tony Stark hugging Peter Parker in the middle of a battlefield. The immense emotional weight of these moments was deeply, profoundly real to the characters experiencing them. Absolutely. But the choices weren't really theirs. They were only allowed to happen because they served the grand design. They were permitted emotions acting out within a carefully constructed cage. The illusion of choice is, without a doubt, the greatest weapon the timeline architect possesses. And all of this brings us to a deeply, deeply unsettling realization. Thanos conquered with brute force, so everyone always knew they were being oppressed. But this new puppet master shapes events so flawlessly from the shadows that the victims actually celebrate their own subjugation. Thanos was loud. He brought massive warships, the Black Order, and outright visible destruction to your front door. When Thanos was hurting you, you knew exactly who the enemy was. But He Who Remains, his methods are infinitely more insidious. He completely controls you by making you think you are winning. He subjugates you by quietly guiding your own hands to build the very prison you live in. When Tony Stark snapped his fingers, he completely believed he was ending a war. But I submit to you today that he was actually finalizing a massive timeline operation designed to ensure total multiversal control. I am Iron Man. It's viewed as the ultimate declaration of personal agency and defiance. Yet when you look at the grand, terrifying scope of the multiverse, Tony was merely striking the final key in a sequence programmed by a dictator at the end of time. The heroes truly thought they were breaking the system, but they were actually just completing the installation of it. So the most unsettling truth we are left with is that the greatest, most universally celebrated victory we have ever witnessed was actually the exact moment the timeline achieved a perfect, inescapable checkmate. The heroes didn't outsmart destiny, they fulfilled it to the exact, literal letter. And that leaves us with one final, incredibly provocative question to walk away with today.
Think about this. If our absolute greatest triumphs and our deepest, most painful sacrifices are actually quietly engineered by cosmic forces we can't even see, are we ever truly the main characters of our own story? Or are we just pieces waiting to be moved on the board?